Hey, Tabitha, everyone's probably wanting to know, how do we get one?
We wish it was all like so easy, but it's not. The agency loves to push it back. They love to say the normal parental responsibility, and the token comment of all children require substantial support from their parents. So particularly, I'd say like under 10 is where they really just love to gaslight you and push this on you. Um, and so there's a lot of ways that you can look into this, and you need to really be, on your game in being an advocate for how you direct it to your NJS LAC or contact there. So you need to really differentiate between what is the typical support for a child of that age, and then what is their disability specific support. So one of the things that I saw Sandy mention in the chat and is becoming a golden ticket through NDIS for things is a functional capacity assessment. And so, through an occupational therapist, a functional capacity assessment, one of the elements can be to assess a list of tasks across a period of a day, and then you putting in a time frame of how long these tasks take. So, for example, in the morning, getting them to take their medicine. It's not as easy as here's your medicine, take it, off we go. Some days I can have 30, 45-minute fight of chasing them with the medicine, the cups of water, back and forth, back and forth. Bedtime. It's not always as easy as just reading a story, putting them into bed. They need that one-on-one support. They need the support of breaking down their day, of moving through behaviors, the sensory feeling of the sheets. My bed doesn't feel right. My day has been blah, blah, blah. And all these things just come up and come up. And all of a sudden, you're in there for 2 hours every night working through all of these things. So you really need to highlight that difference
Yeah.
between, what is ordinary parenting and then what is disability. So it's focusing on that. And sometimes when you really do that focus, you go like, wow, I actually didn't realize how many extra things. And even talking to some other parents and going like, oh, you know, what does bedtime look like to you? Like, talk me through your routine. And then you're like, oh yeah, but we do this and we do that and then you're like, wow, I do like 5 times more than somebody else. And focusing on that and documenting it, listing it out. How many minutes does it take you? And really having that information there to show each specific task that you do that is disability related for your little person.
And with that 24-hour task breakdown, we find that so you do the running tally, like Tabitha says, then we actually have a week, like a list of weekly tasks, and then a list of monthly tasks as well. So we will go, okay, so weekly, look, for Pippa, it would be I need to make sure that I've got enough tube, like I need to check that her tube hasn't gone moldy for her peg. We need to attend, I don't know, let's say 3 therapy appointments. There needs to be medication ordering. There needs to be, I don't know, what else do we do? Doctor's appointments, blah, 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 blah. And even doctor's appointments and therapy appointments, we get pushed back on, we found through Ali's, because it's quite typical to take your kids to the doctor's appointments. But we had a little person who, and I have permission from her mum to share information about her. And so she has a really unique disability where she is up to operation, I think, number 21, and she's just turned 3. And so they live 2 hours from their capital city. And they worked out that they did 124 doctor's appointments and or surgeries 2 hours away from their home in 12 months. And so we had to provide a hospital discharge thing, which shows all of the outpatients appointments and all that sort of thing, in order to get funding for a support worker to support with all of those things. So this is the level of going, oh, I have to go to lots of doctor's appointments. It doesn't cut it. Hard, black and white evidence like that hospital discharge. And then also where we get a lot of traction is demonstrating parents' reduced capacity. So to say that you're tired, and I don't want to minimize this, but this is sort of our bread and butter at Ali, is we need evidence of your fatigue as a parent. We need evidence of, we've got a lot of parents with back injuries from lifting and doing transfers and all that sort of thing. Just talking about that isn't enough. We need something from your treating physician. And the difference is, and for those of you here who don't know my background, I was diagnosed with cervical cancer in June 2021, and Pippa had just had her peg placed in May. And I went to the NDIS to ask for help because I needed to be away for treatment. And they slammed the virtual door on my face. And so I can see now, though, because any parent going through a cancer treatment would need to arrange support for their kids, right? And this is one of the biggest places that we fall down. However, what I didn't do then is go, yes, we're going through a crisis as a family, but this is why I can't leave my disabled child with my neighbors, with my friends, with this. So really breaking it down and making it super, super like no gray areas, right? Like, keep it simple, stupid is essentially the practice we need to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Willow's, she's never wanted one. So we've only just started with a support worker, and it's been a year, and I was stoked that we got 3 hours. I was like, wow, we got 3 hours. It's amazing. And the planner was like, you can have an hour each for 3 days a week. And that was the first time we'd had a support worker. And that was enough at the time because Willow was so anti having one. But I guess this time around, like all the things, like I'm going to put in all the things we've discussed, and I'm like 3 hours a week just does not cut it. So you really need to provide all of those things for sure.
Yeah. And I think I've said to you, Tara, I'm like, I can't wait to get my hands on. I want to get my hands on that one.
At the time, I'm like, amazing, 3 hours. Not enough. 26, who's this? Tabitha.
So we've got a bit of a scenario just to give you a bit of a real life practicality into what we've been discussing. So if you're requesting funding for a support worker to provide support at mealtimes for your six-year-old who has swallowing difficulties and also really strong sensory preferences. So a couple of things coming into it. That then, as a parent or carer, mum, you have to cook a separate meal. You have to sit there and feed her, monitor for any signs of aspiration, ensure then following the meal that they've got the correct positioning for at least 30 minutes after the meal. And then also amongst that, managing all the sensory overload, the frequent tantrums, meltdowns, whilst probably trying to eat your own meal and manage the rest of the family as well. So this is taking well over 60 minutes of an evening. Next one, Tara. So breaking this down into what's typical versus disability specific support. So this is where we say, of really highlighting what is a typical experience. So parent will cook a meal for the family. They might sit at the table or whatever their dynamic is, supervise the eating, and then provide any support and discussion there. Versus what's the disability support is that it's prolonged mealtime of around 60 minutes. So it might be actually physically being there, breaking up food, spooning food, feeding them, then monitoring them for 30 minutes following the meal, supervising, making sure that they're positioned correctly. So that's that one-on-one attention, making sure that that's focused, monitoring for any aspiration risk during that time, and then potentially having to, be on that alert, which is fight or flight. Like if you're monitoring for that risk, you never know when it's going to happen. So you're sitting there in a heightened state, whilst also managing the sensory overload, the co-regulation, and trying to get on with the evening. So it's a huge amount of time there spent, but outlining each task and the extra work involved with it to really highlight how that is a disability need versus a ordinary burnout parenting need for fighting and not liking food.
Okay, and we sort of covered this, but going a bit deeper on why we have to show why and how we do it. Hayley.
Okay, so we've already covered the compare milestones. We've already covered the 24-hour task breakdown. We've covered the be specific, but I also want to highlight the need to be specific about the times that you want a support worker. Now, 99.9% of cases, this is not going to lock you into then using those support workers at those specific times that you've requested. But just going to a plan reassessment and saying, I want support workers, and having a functional capacity assessment and other evidence from your treating team that go, they would really benefit from a support worker, is not going to cut the mustard. So for our clients, we do a roster of care. And so especially if you're asking for a lot, sometimes some of the fight back, and this helps also for therapy funding, so get a bonus here too. Sometimes if you've got little kids and you're asking for weekly therapy of X, Y, Z, there'll be the pushback from the agency is, well, when do they get to be a kid? This is not enough. You're saying you're burnt out, but you want them to go to 8 hours of therapy a week. You just do a Monday to Sunday roster and put down there, 6 a.m. till 8 p.m. support worker, 6 p.m. till 8 p.m. support worker. And then underneath, we then do a list of support worker tasks during that time. And then we also put what mum and dad or carer or grandma and grandpa are doing at that time, because the agency is going to firstly go, well, if you've got 2 parents home, why do you need a support worker? Okay. If you getting ready for school is a typical parental responsibility, so why do you need a support worker? So this just answers those questions straight away. And I know some of you will say, well, they don't read it, and I do understand your frustration. But at least then you can be like in the planning meeting, well, have you seen attachment 24 in regards to roster of care? So that is one of the best tips I can give you. And so what now? Is this me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, great. I was just like, I'm really good at taking over sometimes, so always want to get back in my box. So some of the other really practical fit things is one of the really useful analogies I always use is if it was a pair of shoes that you bought and they didn't feel right and they didn't fit, you would take them back to the shop. And that is absolutely okay to do that with support workers, with anyone, okay? You don't need to feel like just because we're working with humans that we need to abide and go, oh, I don't really love them. I can't put my finger on it, but, we'll just suck it up. You absolutely don't need to do that. So make sure you look for a personality, skills, and reliability. And, a good example too is if you're a quiet family and then you would not like someone like me coming into your house, okay? I would do your head in. I am loud. I am, like, come on, let's do it, rah, rah, rah. Like I'm, all that. Like I am not everyone's cup of tea. But it's also on the contrary. If I had a meek and mild Alice come into my house, I would be like, this isn't the right fit. So it's really important that you, have a good understanding of who you're looking for. Set clear expectations. Write it down. Make them a list. Give examples, because people don't know what you don't know. And I will say those first couple of times when you have a support worker come into your house, it's awkward as fudge, right? It is so awkward. It's like, oh my God, like, what do they do? We're just sitting here and we all feel really awkward. Just sit with that, okay? It does pass. And I always sort of look at it and go, is this support worker someone who you would put a bra on for? So that's always at Ali. That's how we go, oh, do we like them? And it's like, I answered the door without a bra on. So yes, they are so part of our family. But that's the level of comfort that you want to have. It needs to be professional, but you need to be able to be you in your home, floppy boobs and all. Keep good records. Yeah, that's right. But it is. I hate wearing pants to bed. So sometimes I'm like, oh, shit, Kerry's at the door and don't have my pajama pants on. And I'm like, oh, well, that's fine. She knows what she's in for. So stay on top of NDIS compliance. So please make sure you get a service agreement, please, that include things about cancellation policies. I always talk to my support workers about what is their sickness threshold. So because our kids get sick a lot more than other kids. And so if you have a support worker that doesn't want to work when so-and-so has a runny nose, then that's not going to work for me. We sort of draw the line at gastro. But even then, I've had times where Pip's been sick, but her support worker has come in and she's made up some communication resources, or she's meal prepped for the week or something like that, because we need to ensure, I try and ensure her hours as well so that she doesn't leave me. And, you can have a mix. You can have a couple of independents, and then sometimes it's really nice to have the backup and the confidence of having an agency, okay? So you can find the combination that works for you.
Okay, question time. We managed to not delve away. There were some that came up and I'm like, oh, no, we'll wait.
I know, we were so good, and it's 1:30.
Well done, team. So there are a lot of great sort of tips in the chat as well. So thanks everyone for adding those in. There's lots of tips. I'm trying to find a question.
So there was one question in there, and I can't spot it straight away, but it was in regards to your little person not wanting to work with a support worker.
That's the one I just found.
Yep, so resistant to working with a stranger, not sure how to explain the benefits for him to become more independent and have better social skills. In my lived experience, there is no wording that you can do to justify the benefits to them. They will not get it. What I have found that works in our household is actually having the support worker come in as someone who's coming to perhaps see me, not them. Because if you put the demand on my son particularly, then it's like, oh, no, I'm not going to like them. I don't want anyone. And so I say, well, I'm working with this person. I've been having chats with them. I'm learning things. So they come in and they help me with some things. Or they might then help one of my other children. And so a way to get my son to engage is for a support worker to give focused attention to my middle child. And then he's like, what's going on? And get them to be doing an activity, and you'll see the peeping into the room, and then he'll be like, what are you doing? And just getting that FOMO experience of that. Then they become a trusted person in the household, but the demand isn't on the participant themselves. And then they're in the household a couple of times. I've had our current support worker that we've got, initially she just came over for a coffee and was like that was her suggestion, that she goes, well, you might not like me, so why don't we just have a bit of a chat, see what it's like. So that initial introduction was just focused on me, and they didn't have to be engaged, but they saw I was trusting them, and then we built up different skill sets on there. So sometimes that gentle approach of them then seeing them as no longer a stranger is an option. Another option, and obviously you need to look into the rules and the code of ethics and things around NDIS, but they don't necessarily have to be a person that is independent from your circle. So they may be somebody, they might be a friend's friend. They might be, someone who's known to you through, some experience, and you are able to engage them as an independent support worker. But you must also be vigilant about, things like conflicts of interest and how that can come into play. So if they are somebody who you may ordinarily ask to babysit your children, through kindness, then you wouldn't normally engage them as an employee, and because that can be seen as a conflict. But if you have a neighbor that you go like, I could never put my kids on there without paying them, and something like that, then perhaps that could be appropriate. But it's definitely a case by case.
So that's Willow. So that's why for so long I sort of felt like it's going to be too hard. She was very adamant because she's quite wise behind her years. She was like, I am never having a support worker. It's yours. She should work for the NDIS because she's like, you're my mum. It's your responsibility. So we put it off for so long. And then one day I was like, she used to have this teacher's aide, and it was the only teacher's aide she liked. She hated the rest. She left, of course, because she had a baby. So that caused so much, and Willow just adored her. So one day I reached out and I asked her, I'm like, would you be interested in being Willow's support worker? So that's who she has now. But even then, Willow was still a bit more like, I don't get why I need one. The girls don't have one. It's not fair. And for us, we reframed how we spoke about the support worker. So Willow calls her support bestie. She's not a support worker. And anyone who says, like even at school drop-off, or they say, are you seeing your support worker? She's like, she's not my support worker. She's my support bestie. So sometimes just reframing how you speak about it as well, I think.
Yeah. Pippa calls Carrie. No, that's my Carrie.
Yeah,
that's my Carrie. I found another question. So if this is from Kel Riddett, if you get, say, 60 minutes per night funding, can you choose to do some 2-hour shifts instead and some nights without a support worker? So I would encourage you to have a look at our described supports webinar. But basically it comes down to how it's worded in your plan. So in terms of with core funding, you'll see that it says flexible or stated. Okay. So and it also comes down to plan managers, but side note, Kindship, they don't do that. Just putting it out there. So with your core funding, if it says flexible support, it is fairly flexible because the agency haven't stated it. However, you will find some plan managers, if they say, 1 hour a day, 3 days a week, they won't pay it because they'll say that it's not in line with the plan. And this is the cluster F that we're now dealing with since the agency. I won't go into it too much because we've spoken about it at length. But if it says it's a stated support and they say 1 hour per day, 3 days a week or whatever, you are unfortunately stuck with that. So one of the tricky things that you'll find too is that with SHADs, the minimum shift, I believe, is 2 hours. Is it 2 or 3, Tabitha?
So it depends on the category that they sit in. So for some category it's 2, and then there's another one where it's 3.
Okay. So we'll say on average,
minimum. Be aware of that.
Yeah. No, so the agency are aware of that. They're very aware of that. They just have said that's not their problem. Okay. So it's not their problem. So that's the trickiest things with when we're looking at 1 hour shifts, is that with agencies, they need to be giving their staff 2 hour shifts. Yeah. So you will find that a lot of agencies won't take on 1 hour of support unless they're huge and there's other people that they can support essentially next door. And this is where sometimes you do need to engage an independent support worker who would be more likely to do that.
Yeah. I know we've covered this in another webinar too, but I thought quickly, so if the support worker is having them after school, can they pick them up in this instance?
I don't want to say yes or no in this instance, and I think that was sort of where we came to. What I will say is there is a difference between how you ask for funding to be included in your plan, and then there is a difference between the execution. So I'll be really upfront. My support worker picks up Pippa from school and they then go and do community access. Yeah. And in that instance, I am, really comfortable in saying that that is a reasonable and necessary support. However, the agency there is the argument that says, well, it's still reasonable for you to pick up your child from school and then you could drive her to the park to meet the support worker there and then they can engage in community access. So I guess my answer for that is it depends how risk adverse you are. I feel really comfortable in justifying it. Yeah. Would the agency have the capacity to do some recourse on me? Possibly, but it's something that I'm willing to, I guess, God, if anyone's here with the agency right now, we'll test that theory. But it's something that I'm not too worried about, to be fair. Yeah. And it's also, just to provide an example, Pippa's in a Napa intensive at the minute. My husband is away for 2 weeks. And so this week, the support worker is taking her to and from Napa. And I am, again, really comfortable that doing 3, for those of you who don't know Napa is an intensive form of therapy. And so Pippa does 3 hours a day, 5 days a week for 3 weeks. That exceeds your typical, in my opinion, reasonable parental responsibility. And so in that sense, we've got a support worker doing it. So it's really about asking yourself, where do you feel comfortable drawing that line? And I'm probably more comfortable than a lot of other people because I live and breathe it. So it's really about what you are willing to do.
Well, we're just saying we do it, but I wasn't going to say, but now that you have, I'm like, yep, that's what we do.
Yeah, I put it out there. Yeah. If I get in trouble, I get in trouble.
If I have plans for myself and my children, some of these things would be okay if they were used under my plan rather than my children's plan. So I think this one came off the back of speaking about the same thing, picking your child up from school.
I think we did discuss this in, I put in the chat, I think, so we did discuss this in our previous webinar and how this can come about. So in some situations where it may be assisting to build the parent's capacity. So it must be related to your disability, your goals, your plan. So there's no, yes or no, it would be okay. It does need to depend on, each circumstance. In that, I did put some information in the chat. If you want the previous webinar links, to email Tara, and she can send those to you, because we did discuss this specifically in there. So you'll get quite a lot more involved discussion if you...
Yeah, I just saw your comment then. Here is another one. I have 2 boys on 1-to-1 for 6 months, then reduced 2-to-1 for 6 months, and they are 11 and 12. How do we advocate for 1-to-1 continue? So I think this was asked before you shared some of your tips.
Yeah, and the only other thing that I would encourage in this instance is that you can, I think what will be hard is you will almost need the 2-to-1 to happen to demonstrate it doesn't work, to then advocate back for the 1-to-1, but it's exactly the same in, demonstrating why 1-to-1 it has to be, why 2-to-1 puts them at risk, puts you at risk, puts their progress at risk, and breaking down those daily tasks.
I did put in the chat in response to that one. I just put some headlines of, areas to consider. So in that, like, safety and risk, personal care needs, communication barriers, sensory sensitivities. So a number of those things actually sort of break it down into highlighting where the risks, are, where the behaviors are, where the extra support is, and working with a behavior therapist, if that is something where the risk is, can be really quite comprehensive there, because then that can be outlined and advocated for appropriately, and getting that support in as well.
This one, that document that you shared, which we shared, I think, for the last webinar or maybe the one before, would that be useful? A useful template?
Yeah, so that's basically a version of the executive summary that we provide. We also have a number of other different templates, but they're not public, to be fair, because it's on the list, but that doesn't, it's literally down to you could put it into Chat GPT and say, create me a 24-hour task breakdown for my 12-year-old who has autism and cerebral palsy, and work off of that. It will give you a really decent starting point.
Okay, another one. I'm not sure what you've answered. I know you've been answering some, Tabitha. You already read it?
When I look at this, Kel, it's actually really interesting because the agency have it somewhere on their website. And look, I'm just putting this disclaimer that it was probably 12 months ago I seen this. So who knows if it's still relevant. But it's actually written on there that they don't expect support worker organisations to keep case notes. I'm trying to think of the exact reference, but there is the responsibility on the support worker. So in terms of, I wouldn't be worrying, Kel, too much in terms of it being your responsibility, because at the end of the day, if you have got a service agreement and are very clear about the role and different things that is expected of the support worker, that should be enough. I've never heard of the agency asking for evidence. It would only be if the payment integrity team became involved at any point, which, I would just cross that bridge if it came to it, but I wouldn't be too worried about that.
This one. So Rachel, I was actually thinking this as well, because I'm sort of putting everything into play for Willows. Is it worth asking the support worker to write something when you're trying to get more funding, or it wouldn't be really looked at?
I think this is one of those things where it unfortunately comes into play that it depends on the planner that you get, depends on what they read. Majority of experiences that I've either been through personally or have seen is the NDIS tend to value and put more weight on documents and reports from allied health professionals, particularly occupational therapists and behavior therapists. So I would say, just from my lived experience, that you would likely get more impact from it being written by an OT or behavior therapist to say that, that they have seen, that they know of, that this is how it's working, in that the support worker has improved the participant's capacity, the parent's capacity, whatever it may be, and have it documented in their reports. I feel that would hold more weight than a support worker writing a letter of support. You can also write it yourself as a parent or carer in your carer impact statement. So you can write in there how having a support worker has changed the family, the impact that it's had on the family, on yourself, on the participant, and and showing that real comparison of where you are at and what you've now been able to achieve because of that.
Yeah. This one, I guess it's like going back to Willow's. Her support worker, I knew her, but it's not like I hung out with her. She came over on the weekend or anything like that. I hadn't seen her since she was Willow's teacher's aide. So I guess it's about how well you know them, and what Tabitha brushed on before as well.
Yeah. So I think like local area coordinators, what I have discovered in my lived experience is they love to gaslight you and say, you're not allowed to do this, you're not allowed to do that. But it comes down to, well, what does the NDIS legislation say? What do the guidelines say? What does the NDIS Commission say? So looking particularly in this instance, it would be in regards to the Code of Ethics and ethical conduct and what is said in there. And in the documents, there is nothing that says you can't employ someone but there are things around, informal supports and employing family members and informal supports. So, in that, you've got to look at and weigh up that conflict that, like I said, if they are somebody who might ordinarily care for your children or you might ask for help, then the likelihood is they are not appropriate to ask and employ as a support worker.
Okay, I think we're nearly at the end. Well, I don't know if you wanted to answer this.
How do you get funding for NAPA? You have a 4-year-old plan that keeps rolling over and you hold on to it like your life is depending on it. Oh, no. So, look, NAPA is really, really tricky these days, especially with new funding periods. Yeah. And it's also, in complete transparency, the agency have got an internal knowledge article that has been released under Freedom of Information, which says that they've got evidence stating that NAPA intensives do not work. So, So in the past, we have had success with having a 3-month trial. Sorry, not a 3-month trial. Having a trial, like doing one intensive, if you can, with flexible funding. If you can't afford it in your existing plan, when you go for a plan reassessment, again, just ask for one trial intensive, and then the agency used to sort of say, well, and then we need the report to see if it's been worthwhile and value for money, and then you provide that and do a change of situation with that evidence. I would encourage you to look at how your child is streamed. So if they are, and you can find that out through your NDIS contact, also known as your local area coordinator or early childhood partner. So if your child is streamed under general supports, okay, I don't like your chances of getting a NAPA intensive funded. Whereas if they are streamed as intensive, and I can't think of it off the top of my name, the tiers, but there's basically 5 different tiers of how the agency streams people with disabilities as they come onto the scheme. And so really honing in on why intensive therapy for a young person is so beneficial, how it will save the agency money in the long run, what are the risks to our little friend if they do not get NAPA therapy, and sometimes if you just play the game a bit and go, look, we just need intensive funding for the next 2 years. We've had some success with that, but again, it comes down to your planner. It comes down to being creative with your funding periods. So make sure that you ask for your improved daily living skills funding periods to be at a minimum 6 months. They'll tell you that they can only be 3 months, but that's hogswash. So those are just lots of little things that we've had that work for us at Ali Disability.
Okay, I think we're up. Can you ignore your LAC if they say we can't do something?
Look, at the end, all I'm going to say is that the NDIS legislation makes it very clear that only the CEO and the delegates of CEOs, so delegates are your NDIS planners, have decision-making powers within the agency, okay? And LAC is not a planner, they are not a delegate, and they are not a CEO. And that's all I'm going to say on that.
I will add to that and say something that we have discovered in this in finding it beneficial to help our members is then asking the LAC to provide the planner's notes for how the plan was constructed. So if the planner's notes say what they've said in there and says, you know, you cannot do X, Y, Z, okay, then you have to do it. But if the planner's notes, you know, might use something, you know, for example, or, you know, things, you can get quite a lot of information from there, especially in the world of NDIS supports and not supports in these Schedule 1 and Schedule 2 that have come out. We have been able to obtain the planner's notes for the participant, which say and list out all of these items which are no longer deemed NDIS supports, however, were built into that participant's plan because they are deemed disability and NDIS supports for that participant. So that is something that you can request from the NDIS. They're not always great detailed, but that can give you some more ground in that.
Great. Okay, that wraps us up. So we were a little bit shorter. So if you're looking for a support coordinator, reach out to Ali and Kindship Plan Management for your plan manager. We Kindship also have the Connect group, which is all about that support and connection and celebrating that lived experience. So feel free to join there as well. After each webinar, a week later, we do a Q&A. So if you've left today and you're thinking like, oh, they didn't touch on this, or I need more information on this, we will send you a link with a follow-up email, and you can register through there and pop your questions through, and we'll make sure we cover it in that as well. Is that scheduled in for next Tuesday, 12:30?
No,
or
it's not next Tuesday because I can't do next Tuesday, but I think we said Monday the 15th at 12:30 AEST time.
Okay, great. I'll send everyone that with the follow-up webinar as well. We also have a resource which we will send through as a little gift for you guys for hanging out with us today. So that's all about finding a support worker, what qualities to look for. I think in it, it's got perhaps like a questionnaire sort of thing that you can get them to fill out to see if they're a good fit. So we'll send that through in our follow-up as well. Okay.
Thanks
everyone.
for having us. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.